Hey, Ralph.
Hey Jim, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Sounds like I've got a frog in my throat.
Yeah, maybe even an Englishman.
Oh, dear. Well, we've been doing a lot of stuff on humor, and we've been putting our podcasts up on YouTube. And I hope our listeners will actually go to YouTube and see some of the videos that we've put along with the audio.
Yeah, there's some interesting and entertaining pictures there,
Yeah, we're using our creativity.
such as it
Such
is.
a, hey, I got a book here, Ralph.
Okay.
It's written by a guy named Chris Anderson. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, he's the guy who is head of TED, the talks worth listening to.
Right. And he's got this book called Infectious Generosity, the ultimate ideas worth sharing.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about giving things away, sharing freely. Now, you and I have had a little experience with TED Talks, and we're not sure that they share their TED Talks as freely as we would
As
like to see.
we would like to see, and that's a whole other story that we'll tell our listeners at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, generosity is an interesting concept because one of the things that we know is that people who practice generosity find themselves having happier lives.
Yeah. And um, giving things away as opposed to being the miser that hoards everything unto himself or herself increases happiness.
Yeah, so be Bob Cratchit rather than Scrooge.
Right. Okay, I have a quiz for you, Ralph.
Okay,
It's a,
I'm not sure that I'm quiz worthy, but
okay.
I'll try anything once.
Oh, it's in the book, and but I'm not going to read it exactly from the book. I'm going to change a couple things so that we
Okay,
don't get dinged for copyright violations. Okay.
sure thing.
All right. Um, let's see. We'll make the hero of the story here. We'll make Ralph as the hero.
Okay,
Okay, Ralph gives $5,000 to charity. It pays for vital surgery that restores the sight of a child. Is this generous or not generous?
I would say that's generous.
Okay, you'd be with 97% of the people who've taken this, and they say it's generous. Okay, now um, let's see. Here's the next one. Ralph gives the $5,000 to charity, but something that I left out is that Ralph is a billionaire. Now, is Ralph generous or not generous?
Yes, he's generous. Is that a gift worthy of his total wealth? Maybe not, but it could be that he repeats that gift in other ways. So, yes, I say he's still generous.
Okay. Um, let's see. Ralph, all right, let's see these bifocals here. Ralph earned the money from a business whose employees have, let's see, horrible working conditions. Now,
Okay.
he's given $5,000. He earned it from a business that where he's treating the employees badly. Is it generous or not generous?
Yes, he's generous. Is he a good employer? No.
Okay. Now, 51% said generous, 49% said not generous. From the tone of your voice and your hesitancy, I'd say that you're kind of not thinking he's as generous as he was in the first scenario, right?
No, and the thing is, he's still generous.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving of what he has, but he's still a bad employer because he treats his employees very badly.
Okay. Ralph gives $5,000 to a charity, which pays for the surgery that restores the sight to a child. Now, Ralph does not tell anyone about this. Generous or not generous?
Generous.
Generous. Ralph films the entire process for YouTube, and in a manner designed to evoke powerful emotions. The video gets 5 million views. Okay, is he generous or not generous?
Well, ethically, I think he's still generous. Is he self-serving? Yes.
Okay, yeah. 56% of the people who took this said, yeah, he's still generous, but a little bit's wearing off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there's a difference between, in my mind, the ability to be generous and using it for a self-centered purpose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now factor this one in. He gets hundreds of comments on YouTube, and hundreds and hundreds of people said that they were inspired to also support the restoration of sight for children. Generous or not generous?
Still self-serving, but generous.
81% say generous. Okay. Now, Ralph gives $5,000 to charity for the improvement of sight. Let's see. Tragically, the eye becomes infected and the child dies 2 weeks later. Generous or not generous?
Generous.
Yeah.
He did not control the end result.
Right. Again, 97% say generous, 3% say not generous. Okay. Now, see, I'm reading really small print here, Ralph, so forgive me for stumbling around.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Ralph knew that the charity had been criticized for using unqualified medical staff. Okay. Generous or not generous?
No, that's not generous.
Okay.
I mean, his impulse is still generous, but he should have done considerably more vetting on who he got to do the surgery.
Okay. 61% said not generous. Okay. Now, going back to Ralph again with his $5,000, he pays for the surgery that restores the sight of the child. Let's see. The child had been blinded when she swerved with her bicycle into and was hit by Ralph's car. Okay, so there's the scenario.
Okay.
Pays for the surgery for a little girl who swerved with her bike and hit Ralph's car.
In that case, I'm going to say the impulse is less than totally generous. It's an assuagement of his own guilt.
Okay, 51% would agree with you, Ralph. They would say not generous. Now, there was one other caveat for Ralph here, that the car that hit the bicycle hit the car, was going through a residential neighborhood at 65 miles an hour.
Still assuaging his own guilt. In fact, probably higher level of guilt because he knew he was speeding. So in this case, Ralph is not generous.
Okay, that's kind of interesting as I went through it, thinking about it. We have exactly the same initial scenario. Ralph giving $5,000 to help restore the vision or to a charity that helps restore vision. But depending upon the circumstances, what do we get? Different perceptions.
Different levels of, is he generous or is he not generous?
Mm-hmm.
And, certainly if I am, as Ralph, if I am a billionaire, giving $5,000 is that's 10 minutes income, maybe.
Yeah, right.
So that we could say on the face of it that that's not generous. If I gave the organization $500,000 and they could restore the sight of many children, then that would be a laudable act, and I could say, well, I was very generous in doing that.
Well, if the Ralph that's sitting beside me here, getting recorded, gave $5,000 to charity, would that be generous?
It would be generous.
Because you don't have any money.
Because I don't have any money,
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about that at some point. Folks, help us monetize these things, will you? Okay.
But the thing is, Jim, I guess that, those of us I just looked this morning, there was a thing on the income levels in various states.
Uh-huh.
And the median income level in Michigan, where Jim and I are recording this, is $46,000 annually.
Okay.
So that's the middle income.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, how does that compare with other states?
Well, Massachusetts is the highest, and it has an annual income median of about 80,000.
Okay. 80,000.
So it's about half of some states, of the richest states.
Okay. How about a place like California? Do you remember that one?
Surprisingly, California and New York they're high, but they're not in the top 5 or 6.
Huh. Interesting. Because I would think that probably Massachusetts would be an expensive state to live in.
It's an expensive state to live in, which may have some influence on its high median income level, because people have to pay high wages to attract people to live in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about, and it's up on our YouTube channel now, is the importance of happiness. And we talked about the happiness index, remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And China was number 1 in terms of being a happy country.
Right, surprisingly enough, with all of their social controls and so on and so forth.
Well, how would you rate Michigan? We're kind of in the middle, would you say? With
okay. 46,000 median income. That's about the middle.
Okay.
32,000 was the lowest, and that was in Mississippi.
Okay.
So, you say, well, okay, so we're about the middle level. I think as a state, we're a fairly happy place to be.
I think so.
Except we have agonizingly long and cold winters.
Except for this one, right?
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, people, complain and bitch about the climate, but as people, I think we're pretty happy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, happiness, you have to have, I think, enough money to live,
mm-hmm.
but you don't have to have huge riches to be happy.
Okay. How does this fit in with generosity, do you think?
Well, I think people are sometimes generous up to the level that they feel that they can realistically support.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, my wife and I have been, I think, quite generous with a number of people that we have encountered through our church who are homeless.
Uh-huh.
And we've helped them out in various ways. We've given at least a couple of them a place to live through the colder months. And we're happy to have done that. Could we give the local organization that supports people who are down and out $10,000 directly? No, we couldn't. We just don't have that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
But we do what we can.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we, got out into happiness because the book does talk about that too. And there's an interesting little chart over here on page 57. And this is how you spend your money, Ralph.
Okay.
See, over on this side, it's below average happiness. On this side, it's above average happiness.
Okay.
So if you're spending money on yourself, you're below average in happiness.
Okay.
Now, that the people that you're helping, they're not exactly strangers. So if you help a stranger, I guess that would be. Remember when we were giving away $5 bills in Toronto?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some people didn't want to take the $5 bills.
Yeah, they felt there was something phony about it. I mean, that we were going to,
Yeah.
I don't know, con them out of something.
We had just come from a happiness conference, right? and we were still so high on happiness. Okay, so if you gave something to the family members, that's kind of almost in the middle, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so inside the family, or so, how about further away in the family? Say,
Okay, so if I give something to my daughter, that's the family in.
yeah,
If I give something to my cousin, that's the family out.
yeah, and it's interesting that family out is in the above average range
Right.
in terms of happiness. Now look what's underneath,
So if I help out my friends,
higher.
higher.
So you help out yourself, lower. Help out your friends, higher.
Okay.
Hey, Ralph, can you spare a buck? Or what did Wimpy used to say? Will you give me a hamburger that I will pay for tomorrow?
Yeah, I will happily pay you for a hamburger on Tuesday if you give me one today. Yes. And local organizations, happier than giving to friends.
And national organizations, even happier.
Even happier.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not very much, really.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that, if you give to the National Association for the Blind, just because we took that quiz, that generally, according to the book, makes you happier than giving to a friend who you know well.
Okay, yeah, somewhat happier. But giving to the National Association for the Blind is makes you happier than buying a new pair of jeans for yourself, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would look at, Jim, in that is to say generosity in whatever level you feel is not going to deprive your immediate family of their necessities is important. It's worth all of us doing.
But it's not worth giving away the seed corn if you're going to be depriving your family, right?
Right. So you say to yourself, well, I could send my my child who's always shown an interest in mechanics. I could send him to the local community college, and he takes a 2-year course in diesel mechanics and ends up making $80,000 a year as a diesel mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
That's worth doing.
Okay. Or you can send him to a 4-year university and get an English degree, and he can make minimum wage flipping burgers, right?
Yeah, or even if he goes into teaching, he starts out at about $27,000 a year.
That's below that median that you talked about.
Yeah.
Well, we started with the generosity quiz, and you're right up there, Ralph, with the other people who've taken it. And your scores were kind of right on. So I don't know what that exactly means. We've already established the fact that you're not average.
No, and I think what it means, Jim, is that, and this is something that I may be wrong in, but I've always seen myself as a fairly generous person,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that most of us need to look at and say to ourselves: do we see ourselves as a generous person? If not, why not?
Good point. Okay, until the next time, this is Jim
And Ralph,
saying keep your stick on the ice.
because we're all in this
together.
together.